A little bit of information about myself. I am a customs broker and freight forwarder. I work for the Irwin Brown Company. It's my family business. Irwin Brown was my uncle. My father is the president, so there's a little nepotism in there, but I think that you only get into the customs brokerage business by accident, answering a job, or by blood. And I'm sure the apps at JW Allen will agree with that. So I got this graphic made because I realized that telling people that I'm a customs broker, nobody really understands what that means. A lot of people don't understand what happens and how you get something from country A to country B. And this is what I'm trying to make sure that people understand, and I feel like doing it in a pictorial representation helps you guide along and go, okay, where am I? What needs to happen at this step before the next step comes? I'm going to go ahead and we're going to cover kind of the export section first, and we're going to do some Q&A, and then we'll do the import section and do some Q&A then. So we really kind of split it up just so we're not answering questions about the whole process all at the end and trying to get everything in before we all go. The chart, especially the first section, it's written, the wording of it is a little import-centric. Most of our business is imports. We still do a lot of exports, though. And one of the things is that I'm trying to explain both from an exporting standpoint that you're a company in the US exporting somewhere else, or you're a company in the US and you're importing something, but you're in charge of the export from that country of origin. So it's kind of the same process, but we want to make sure that you understand that if you're exporting from Belize to the US, it's a similar process of the steps that must be taken. To pick up on what Dominic said about FedEx and DHL and UPS, these companies do both small packages and full containers. They own the means of transportation. So when you get a quote from them, they take care of something from start to finish. And so a lot of times the steps that are taken aren't really clear. I think that these companies are great. I don't want to send a box the size of a shoebox if it needs to go to another country, if it's full of paperwork. Sending probably FedEx, UPS, DHL is probably the best way. It's probably the cheapest. It's probably the easiest. There are certain things that they don't ship. There are certain things, once you get to a larger size, it's cheaper to go with a different method. So, but in no way but these guys really do a lot of that small package work. It makes it really easy for everybody. So to start out, before you buy something to import or sell something to export, there are a lot of questions that should be answered. The first one is what your terms of sale are. What responsibility do you as the buyer or seller have in the transportation process really should be established early. So for example, you get something from Home Depot. You order something off the website and it gets mailed to you. Well, that Home Depot is in charge of all the shipping until it reaches your door. You pay for it, part of your shipping charges. But you're not part of any process except telling them where it goes. It's nice if it's a wrench, if it's something small. What if it's a washing machine? So you go to Home Depot and you buy a washing machine. And maybe you're the person who's going to transport it from Home Depot to your house. So you have to get the truck and you have to figure out how to move it. You have to Shanghai 6 of your friends to help move it into your house. And that's your responsibility. And so the terms of sale is when you buy it and you pay for it, it's yours. And how you're getting it out of the store into where it's going is your responsibility. Or you could have Home Depot deliver it and possibly even deliver it and install it. So Home Depot's responsibility is all the way till it's in your house, all set, right there. So this is how I can describe terms of sale as Home Depot's responsibility versus your responsibility of getting things moved. And this is really important with shipments like, my father told me a story of we were exporting ostriches to China. I don't know why we were exporting ostriches to China. Somebody in China bought some ostriches. They were live. On the shipment, one of the ostriches broke his leg, and the other ostrich laid an egg. So whose responsibility was it for the medical care of the ostrich? Was it still the seller's responsibility or the buyer's? And who owned that egg? If the egg was laid at one port or the other, it would have been really clear, but depending on the terms of sale, maybe they had to ship that ostrich egg all the way back to the US because it technically belonged to the seller. So these are things, they come up, these questions come up. It makes it really easy from a legal standpoint if you have clear terms of sale, using the Incoterms and having a good idea of where your liability starts and ends and your responsibility. So also, before you source a good or before you sell a good, making sure you know what free trade agreements are available and what type of programs. So if you're buying something, let's say you're importing something from what?
Taiwan.
From Taiwan versus importing it from Central America. Well, with CAFTA, there's a free trade agreement. There's a good chance that those goods you could import into the US for free. But not always, and not all goods, and depending on how the good is made, and if there's something else that's in there from a foreign country, it might not be free. All of these little bitty details really affect your bottom line. If you're buying wooden bedroom furniture, if you're buying it from Indonesia, wooden bedroom furniture free. If you're buying it from China, depending on who you're buying it from, there's an anti-dumping case. You could pay 216% in duties. You know, so that $70 bed frame that you bought is not really $70 once you get it in. And so knowing ahead of time of what those potential costs are really affects where you're going to buy from and where you want to bring things in from, or send to, because you might be responsible for whatever duties and taxes if you're exporting to another country to get it in. The other consideration is possibly transportation routes. If you're looking to do trade with a country that has a border on water, it makes it a lot easier. There's a port, you could sail your goods right there. But if you have something that's landlocked, you're going to have to pay to get it on a train or on a truck to get to where it's going. And that's more expensive. It's always more expensive to go over land than over water. So shipping to Kazakhstan is not as easy as shipping to Taiwan. There are also certain types of restrictions on importing and exporting. Cars are a great example. If you are shipping a car out of the US to somewhere else, US Customs wants to look at the car. They're going to inspect it. They're going to make sure it's not stolen. They're going to check the VIN numbers just to make sure you don't have some sort of large car theft, transportation, smuggling ring. But on the other side, I had a phone call from somebody who wanted to export cars to the Philippines. And this kind of set off some bells, so I contacted my partner in the Philippines and I said, hey, what types of rules and restrictions are there? Because when you're importing cars into the US, you have to meet EPA standards. Well, he told me that if the car is more than 5 years old, they will not let it into the country. And on top of that, if your car is new, you will pay 100% of the value in taxes. And for every year older it is, you pay 10% less. So if it's a 3-year-old car, you're still paying 70% of the value in taxes. It's really expensive. So before you agree to ship your car somewhere, you might want to make sure you understand what the full costs are. And your freight forwarder or customs broker can really help you with that. They'll find the answers. They'll do that research for you to make sure that you're not surprised when you get some bill in the mail that you've essentially paid for your car twice and paid to ship it to an island nation in Asia. And working with a freight forwarder and customs broker, we want to save you money. We don't want to, we don't want to get to the point where there's certain costs that come up and we don't know who's responsible because you've calculated something to sell your product at, and there are all these other costs and you don't make a profit. We don't want you not to make a profit. We want to really help your business grow. Your customs broker and freight forwarder really act as your import and export department. We are a part of your company in that way. We work with you. We want to work side by side with you to make sure that everything runs smoothly and makes your business grow. Because the better your business does and the more you import and export, the better our business does because the more volume. The next part is contacting the forwarder and planning the transit. The questions that you ask is, what are you moving? It makes a big difference if you're transporting something that's solid versus something that's liquid. What if something's extremely heavy? What if it doesn't fit in a container? What if it's very light and very fragile? What's the best way to move it? And how much? How much are you moving? Are you moving a shoebox? Are you moving a 40-foot container? Answering these questions helps us decide what the method is that we should send things. Timing is also a key factor. Do you need this shipment tomorrow or in 2 days? Do you need this shipment in 3 months and you could wait? When you ship something from China, you have 2 routes usually if you're shipping from China to New Orleans. It'll either come to LA and be put on a train and get to New Orleans that way. It's a little more expensive. It takes about 3 weeks. Or you could put it on a boat and have it sail all the way around and do all water, which is less expensive, but it takes 2 months. So having that timing in there, knowing how long that you have, if you've told somebody it'll arrive at a certain date, if it gets to be too short, you might have to pay more money to stick it on an airplane. And that's another factor. Then you're talking about where is it moving? Where is it starting? Where is it ending? Are you moving from a landlocked country to another landlocked country? Do we have to arrange different types of transportation? So all of these questions tell us how we're going to move it. Are we going to contact the ocean liner? Are we going to contact an air freight? How it's going to get from point A to point B. Along with the moving, insurance is a really key issue with this. And depending on your terms of sale, it'll determine who's in charge of insurance. Nobody thinks that their container is going to be the one in the storm that falls off the boat into the water, but it happens. It happens that there's a hole in the container and there's a ½ inch of water in there, and it shows up and everything's moldy. You want to make sure that you're covered. You want to make sure that if you have something fragile that you're sending, if it breaks, you're covered, because the steamship line will give you $500. Same thing with air freight. They give you a very small portion of the value of your goods. And so you want to make sure that the $1 million of goods that you have in that container are actually covered, the cost of your transit is covered, and your customs broker and freight forwarder can help you get that insurance, file the insurance claims, and take care of that type of coordination as well. All right, moving on. So once you've figured out how you're going to move it, then you start to find quotes. The Irwin Brown Company is part of a global network of freight forwarders and customs brokers. So like I called my partner in the Philippines to ask them a question, in the same way I could call somebody and get a quote. What it's going to cost if I need a truck line to move it from here to there, if I just need to move the entire shipment to a different place. And so talking to somebody in that country, either where it's going or where it's coming from, you know if there's any type of documentation that's needed, you know if there's any certain regulations that comes through. And so you get your quotes. And it's really important to shop around. Don't just get a customs broker who gives you one rate. Make sure you get a couple. Compare. I had a good friend who I've known for a long time who called me. He said, I need to move a pallet from Slovakia to California. And I said, okay. And I called somebody in the Czech Republic, and I called somebody in Austria, and I got quotes. And I sent them out to him. And he said, really, I've got this quote, and I was wondering if you could beat it. And I looked at it, and it was about $300 less than any of the quotes that I had. And I said, that's a great quote. You should go with that. Because the person he got the quote from was actually in Slovakia. So they probably have a lower overhead. They probably had a whole truckload of things moving from that landlocked country to either Germany or one of the surrounding ports. So their costs were lower. I couldn't beat it. I'm not going to try to finagle him to go with me versus somebody else, because I'm not saving him money. I'm not helping him, doing him any favors by having him pay an extra $300 for that. So at this point, once you book your cargo, once you figure out what you want, your freight forwarder acts as your agent and creates a bunch of documentation. They create your export declaration to let the government know what is being shipped out. They create the bill of lading that tells the steamship line what's being sent. And they coordinate the movement of goods. If you need your container picked up on Wednesday, they'll make sure the steamship line knows that the container has to be picked up and they want it on this sailing. That movement is kind of dependent upon what type of availability there is. There's always the possibility that the ship that you think you're going to get on is full, and it might get moved to the next one. A couple years ago, we were having a big container shortage, and this happened a lot. And people's containers got moved to the next ship and the next ship and the next ship, and it was really somewhat devastating for a lot of businesses. But it's one of those risks when you're moving. If you have one container versus somebody who has 40 containers, you might not get on that ship. It's less so now. So, yeah.
Would you prefer questions during or after?
I'm doing questions halfway through and then at the end, so we're almost there. So the last part of the export process is actually an import item. which is the importer security filing. And this is something that's relatively new. It's something that if you ship something on an ocean vessel that's coming into the US, that 24 hours before it leaves the country that it's sailing from, there's a document that has to be filed with US Customs. It tells the customs your entire supply chain, and the purpose of this is if there's, let's say, a consolidator or a warehouse that they suspect is associated with terrorist activity or with smuggling, they might stop your container before it leaves that country. Because otherwise, it gets here and it's on US soil when it gets inspected, and there could be some risks involved. And so they're trying to make sure that they know what's coming into the country 24 hours before it leaves the country that it's coming from. Europe has just instituted something like this. Mostly the steamship line transmits this information rather than a broker or forwarder, but it looks like it's going to be something that's pretty universal as far as security and shipping. And right now it's only ocean freight that this is part of. So your cargo is loaded, it's on the boat, and then it's sailing, it's in transit, and whatever method it's going. So this is where your customs broker enters. And a customs broker is somebody who's licensed by US Customs to act on behalf of importers. Importers can file the documents themselves, but because it's such a complex process, this is why they license brokers. You have to take a pretty insane test. That's 80 questions, and you have 4 hours, and it's multiple choice, and you have about 1.5 feet of source material that you have to look through. And the reason that we're licensed is Customs has basically said that we are people who know what the rules are, what the regulations are, not only for shipping, but also for letting them know what the duties are and handling cargo. And so most questions that you ask a broker, a lot of times they'll look up. They just want to verify that the information that they have is accurate. If they give you an answer right off the cuff, it's probably because they've been asked that question before, and they've had an experience with that product or with shipping to certain countries, and they know. And that's a lot of our knowledge just comes from experience. So when your cargo is sailing, we'll keep track of where it is and track it. And when you get an arrival notice and it says it's coming in on the 15th, it's not an exact science. You never know what's going to go on. You never know if there's a storm. You never know if all the dock workers in LA are going to go on strike and delay all your containers for 2 weeks. It's one of these things that you just kind of have to feel out. And this is how political dynamics really affect international trade. So getting something through the Suez Canal these days, I'm sure, is much more difficult than it was 3 months ago because of the political situation going on. The other thing is if you're bringing something in from China, if you get an arrival notice and it says it arrives on the 15th, well, that's when it arrives into LA. When it arrives into Louisiana, it's going to take a few more days. They're going to transport it inland by rail. So it's one of these things to know that if it says your cargo is coming in on the 15th and you want it delivered to your door on the 16th, it's not going to happen. It still has farther to go. And your broker will explain this to you and let you know along the way if there are hiccups, when they're expecting it, what's going on. And at this point, we usually go in and gather all the documents we need to file the customs entry. And so the more specific things are, the easier it is to work with. So on your invoice, if you tell me that you're importing frozen fish, I need to know what kind of frozen fish. I need to know possibly if it's frozen in water, if it's just flash frozen. And a packing list, because if you have 16 types of fish, I'm possibly going to have to let customs know how many kilograms of each type of fish there is. So really being as specific as you can, let us know what it is, what the product is. If it's a chemical, send us a safety sheet. If it's hazmat, we need to know that because we have to report it and it's going to affect things. If it's a food product, we have to file with FDA. So as much information as you can give your broker on your product really helps them help you make sure everything is right, make sure that customs, if they want to inspect it, they don't have to do a lot of searching for it. Certain cargo has to be more specific than others. Textiles, because of certain free trade agreements, if your sweatshirt is made with, if it has lining from another country, it could knock you out of the free trade agreement. If it is You know, the difference between a shirt and a tank top is the width of the straps. I mean, very specific. We'll probably call you and ask you about 16 questions about your cargo just to make sure that we know what's going on and we can report it accurately. We need a copy of your bill of lading, and that'll usually get sent to you by the steamship line. If we are listed as a notified party as your broker, we will get a copy. And that just matches the info. It lets us know what information as far as weight and measure and number of packages that has been transmitted to customs by the steamship line, and we need to make sure that our information matches that. And then if there's any other certificates, if you're importing endangered wood species, you could get a certificate to do that. If you're importing different types of goods that fall under trade regulations where you need certificates to submit, all of that stuff needs to get to your broker so we could file your entry. Along with this, when you import something, you need a customs bond, and you could do a single entry bond, which means that, let's say you're only bringing in one shipment a year, you get a bond for just your shipment. It's for the value of the duty and the value of the goods. So in the event that, you know, something happens, customs knows that they can get what they're owed. If you're bringing in multiple shipments, it's usually worthwhile to get a continuous bond, and that allows you to really easily bring something in to any port in the country. And if you're bringing in more than 4 shipments a year, it's usually worthwhile. So we've been tracking your cargo, and it's finally arrived. So this is when we've filed your paperwork with customs, and customs and other government agencies decide if they want to look at it. So if you're bringing in explosives, ATF, or they're TTB now, we'll probably want to look at it. If you're bringing in bananas, the Agriculture Department and FDA will probably want to look at it. And for them, they probably want to look and see if you have spiders. For some reason, there's lots of spiders in bananas, and they'll fumigate your container, and they'll send it on your way. Or they'll take the bug and ship it up to Washington, and they'll take a couple days to decide what it is and if it's dangerous. And then if it's fine, they'll just let it in the country. And this is for things like, you know, the reason that we have kudzu and water hyacinth in the country is because of things that get brought in. There's a big war. They're watching out for Chinese gypsy moth because they're really devastating to our environment. And so they're leaving ships off the coast to inspect them before they get brought into US ports. So it might seem silly, it might be overdone, but it really is a big effect on our environment to make sure that certain types of foreign bugs and plants don't get into the country. If you're bringing in household goods, if you are moving from one country to another, if you're coming back to America after living somewhere for a while, that container is going to be inspected. Hands down, household goods, containers inspected. If you have your gun collection in that container, please tell your broker, please put it on your packing list. I can't tell you the number of people who've imported things and haven't given us a good representation. Customs doesn't care that your gun is in there, they just want to know that it is. They want to make sure you're not smuggling it. Other household goods you'd never think about, they want to look at things like if you have a bird and your bird cage is in that container, they're going to want to look at it. They might tell you that you have to fumigate it. They might tell you you have to get rid of it. Gardening tools, nail polish remover. Nail polish remover is a hazardous material. They want to know that it's in there because we probably have to file documents on it. So it gets really specific. Once again, the more information that you could put in there, the better. And the easier it is for us as your broker to call up customs and go, oh, we know what that white powder is. Because it happens. My favorite white powder story is that we had a container come in, it was full of clothing, goes up to the distribution site in Arkansas, and there's this little baggie of white powder, and they freak out and they call the police. Well, they think it's drugs. It's not drugs, it's rock salt. It turns out that in the area that the container comes from, they eat mangoes and they dip it in rock salt, and somebody left their bag of rock salt in the container. So, you might want to look at what's in your container. If it's not yours, you probably want to let the authorities know, but hopefully nobody's trying to hijack your container and use it for drug smuggling. And at this point, this is at the point where all of your duties and fees and taxes get paid. So once we create your documents, knowing what the cargo is, we can usually let you know what your duties are. They're due within 10 days of the cargo arriving and being cleared by customs. And we've got a lot of customers who don't pay any duties, and we have a lot of customers who pay a whole lot of duties. And so the money that's there is just a pass-through. And so it's possible for you to pay customs yourself, especially if you have very high duties. You might want to just give them a ACH account so they could pull that money themselves rather than having to transfer money through different people. So now your cargo is clear, it's free to go. The question is where is it going? If you've booked your container to the door, so if it's going to its final destination and the steamship line is handling that, they will handle getting it on a truck and delivering it to where it's going. Maybe your cargo is going to 3 different distribution sites. So it's going to go to a warehouse, get split out, and be sent to multiple places. Your broker will make sure that your container gets to where it's going, that it gets picked up on time, that the driver knows where it's going, and will confirm with you that the right stuff went to the right place. As far as things going wrong, there's a limit to how much that we can do. We never see your cargo. We don't load your container, we don't unload your container. So we really have to depend on the agents we work with. It's why when we give a recommendation for a trucking line or for somebody to use, we've had good success in the past with that. So if you're looking even just for an internal trucking company to move from city to city, calling a customs broker or freight forwarder and saying, can you give me a recommendation of who to use, might be a really worthwhile endeavor and save you a lot of money and heartache. The other question is who's moving it? If you're moving it to a warehouse facility, are your trucks picking it up? Are we coordinating? Are we getting somebody else's trucks to pick it up? All of these things get worked out, hopefully before even the customs release happens, just so we know and everything can run really smoothly. Your cargo doesn't sit, it doesn't wait, it doesn't go to a warehouse where nobody knows what to do with it. We make sure that the right goods go to the right place. Pretty basic stuff. And then at the end, final verification. This is once your goods have arrived, check them. If you get a container delivered to you, open it up, look at it. If something looks wrong, take a picture. If your cargo is damaged, take a picture, tell the person who delivered it. Make sure that you have a good record, because if you're going to make an insurance claim, they're going to want to know. There's no reason to accept cargo without reimbursement. If you have insurance and your cargo is damaged, file a claim. Your broker could file a claim on your behalf, but as much backup information as you have, that's really important. If the wrong boxes went to the wrong place, let us know, because maybe we need to track down another truck and find out where it went. All of these things are things that your broker can do on your behalf, because we're working with your transportation partners. The other thing to do is assess your total costs. At the end, when your cargo arrives to you, calculate how much it costs to get to you. If it's more or less than you expected, if customs inspected every container that you had, and you have an extra $400 to $1,000 on every container because customs looked at it, there's nothing you can do about it. Customs wants to look at a container, they're going to look at a container, and they're going to charge you for it. So make sure that at the end, you're making enough money off the products that at the very least, your transportation is covered in what you're selling it for. Make sure you're making a profit. Make sure you have enough of a buffer built in there that if customs inspects the container, if something happens, that you're not out of money, because that's not good for anybody.